stuck and there's some transition, you said you're here for the right reason, to try to see where to go next. And I remember when I was interviewing Bob Proctor, I said, again, how do you have so much passion at this stage in your life? You know, he was in his mid-80s when I interviewed him that time. I had him on a few times on the show. And I said, what do you do? You know, why don't you just kind of hang out and relax all day and just, you know, read books and just chill? You know? He was like, I'm so in love with my life and my future life. He told this to me. And he said, I think he said when he turned 80, he was in his mid-80s at this time, and he said, when I turned 80, I realized that I needed to be thinking about my future, and I wanted to fall in love with my future. And so I set a date 10 years in the future at a venue, and I paid for the venue in full for me to do an event 10 years away from now. And I said, what? It's crazy. He goes, I paid in full because it wanted me to get excited about my future 10 years away. It wanted me to be working on my health. It wanted me to be activating my mind, developing relationships, growing, learning. You know, I'm gonna keep being a learner until the day I die. And so he paid for a venue to do an event 10 years in the future. And I thought it was beautiful. He said it was like what gets him up in the morning, what gets him excited, all these different things. And so I want us to think about our futures. I want us to think about how we're gonna fall in love with our future. Another person that I interviewed on the show is Ronnie Ware. Let's see if this clicker works. There we go. Ronnie Ware, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard about, The 5 Regrets of the Dying. I'm sure if you're in this space, you've maybe read this book or seen these 5 regrets. One of the things that she talked about in this interview with her was about these 5 things. And I was like, what is the thing? She was a nurse that worked with people in, you know, their final days, their final months, their final years, and asked them all these questions about their regrets in life. These are people on their deathbed. And these were the 5 things that she heard the most common themes with hundreds of individuals on their deathbed. Maybe it was 1,000 people, I can't remember, but it's a lot of people. The first one is, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life that others expect of me. The second one, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. The third one, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. I don't know how many of us in here stuff our feelings and don't express them. Number 4, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. And number 5, I wish I had let myself be happier. Letting ourselves be happy. Just curious, how many of you in the past, none of us do this right now, but how many of us in the past never let ourselves be happy? If you look around, you can see a lot of hands up. How many of you in the past, we don't do this anymore, how many of you in the past didn't have the courage to express your feelings to relationships or to your parents or friends or whatever it might be? A bunch of hands. So I just want you to reflect on a few of these things. I think a lot of times we get stuck in the past and then we don't have a beautiful vision for our future where we're enough in love with our future. We don't love our future enough. We're not excited about our future enough. And therefore, sometimes we feel stuck. We feel like, what direction am I going to go in? What's next for me? We get stuck in the past, or we're not excited about our future. I had Dr. Joe Dispenza on many times. I think I've had him on, I don't know, 5 or 6 times now. I calculated, because we just had him on last week, or excuse me, this Monday we had him on, and like these 3 days, it's been like 3 weeks for some reason. So much has happened. And before he came on, I went back and just calculated. I think we have almost 50 million views on all the interviews and videos we have with Dr. Joe. And it's something that he talks about, Martha and I, my girlfriend, we went to his workshop last year for 7 days, you know, I don't know, 15-hour days, just meditation, no phones. And because I'm a learner, I'm constantly a student of the things that I'm, you know, interviewing people about. So I like to practice these things just as much. He talked a lot about the future. And I remember saying, well, what if you've had a really challenging, painful past? What if you've really suffered? What if you've gone through horrible things? What if there's been, you know, people that have betrayed you and you've struggled and you've been bankrupt and people hurt you with physical pain and traumas? And he goes, we need to create different memories, different meanings, something that what Inky Johnson talked about, is creating a different meaning around the past and healing the memory of the past so that we can step into our desired future. And he always talks about remembering the future. He says this often. He says we need to remember the future. A friend of mine, when I had him on, and Dr. Joe said this on an interview, he got this tattooed on his hand. So every time he looks at his watch, he sees remember the future on his hand. After he heard this interview. Because my friend was so stuck in the past. He was so stuck in the past that it was keeping him back from taking those leaps that we talked about, to actually jumping and stretching farther than he'd ever stretched before in his life. When we are stuck in past, it's hard to remember our future. The person we are going to be one day is our future. But if we are constantly stuck in the past, we never take those leaps. And one of the things that Dr. Joe says is that we need to be defined by a vision of the future instead of a memory from the past. But I know so many of us define ourselves based on a story of our past. We talk about that story frequently. And and there's a way to talk about our past that is empowering and inspiring, and there's a way to talk about our past that keeps us in the past. Inky talks about his past, and you're like, man, this is inspiring, and look how far he's come, and look where he's going. He's not stuck in the past, saying, I lost my chance, my dream is over, so I'm not going to make anything of myself. He said, because of this, here's what I'm going to make of myself. This happened for me to create a brighter future for my life. Even though I lost something, I gained so much more, right? So be defined by a vision of the future instead of the memory of the past. So I want us to go through a couple of quick exercises together to set the stage and to set the intention for the rest of this day.